Caitanya Maharaj. Please accept my humble obeisances.
Hare Krishna, Gopal Bhatta Prabhu. Please accept mine. So happy to be with you.
I'm very happy to be with you. So we are this is part of a series with interviewing GBC members, as you know. And right. I think that our audience would, of course, many people know you. You're a very famous devotee and worldwide devotee. But still, some of our audience may not know you so much. So I was hoping that you could speak a few words about your history as a devotee and get to know you a little bit better.
Okay. Yeah, well, thank you very much for the opportunity. My name's Bhakti Caitanya Swami. I first saw Srila Prabhupada in April 1972 in Auckland, New Zealand, at the university. I was a student there, and Prabhupada just walked in. I just happened to be in the right place at the right time. Then I went to London, and I was meeting devotees here and there in the meantime. But on January the 7th, 1973, I visited the temple in London, and I met Dhananjaya Prabhu. He was the temple president, and we figured out that we're relatives. And he invited me to stay as a guest. So I stayed, and then I shaved up a few days later. I did different services there, book distribution, running the BBT. Then in January 1980, I came here to South Africa, and I've been here since. Basically, most of the time I've been overseeing what goes on in South Africa. Particularly since 1985, when our main temple opened. Yeah, and I see what's going on around and preach around South Africa. And I go to Russia. Believe it or not, I speak Russian to some moderate degree. I travel around, but the main thing is to try and keep tabs on what's going on in South Africa.
As a GBC member, you have one of the most widest and dispersed zones. Roughly between one part of your zone to another 10,000 miles long distance. How did you ever deal with all that travel?
Well, good question. And I'm not exactly sure. But, during this lockdown, I haven't traveled more than a few meters. So it's really been helping my health. But, the thing is that as long as your health holds up, it's really nice to move around and meet different devotees from different places, different cultures, and see different things that are going on around Prabhupada's ISKCON. And I get a lot of inspiration seeing the different programs that devotees are doing in different parts of the world. And then I try and bring some of it back here to South Africa and also give them in Russia and other places, little information what we're doing here in South Africa. So it's a big cultural exchange, really. Really nice.
So recently, talking about what's going on in the U.S., the United States, there's been some police brutality and a strong movement of what is called Black Lives Matter, which, of course, from a devotional point of view, we sometimes think it's all life matters, including cows and pigs and chickens. But then that movement started to even go international and whatnot. South Africa is a bit famous, maybe infamous in its history with regard to prejudice and whatnot. How is the devotional community as it relates to these topics?
Yeah, well, that's a very good question these days. The remnants of the old, what was called apartheid culture, of keeping the different races apart, separate, the remnants are still there in the air, in different ways, even amongst the devotees to some degree. And, there is a type of a movement amongst the African devotees. We use the term African devotees it's been actually over the last about year and a half or maybe 2 years of them feeling sort of unhappy, disgruntled with some of the ways they have been treated by some devotees. Even on this very program, just I think a couple of weeks ago or so, one young American lady, African American, mentioned some things which she had heard, like, for example, that the devotees from African backgrounds, that they can't get second initiation. There's some sort of official policies to stop them receiving first and particularly second initiation. And, honestly, because I'm the main one when it comes to setting rules around here, pardon me for saying it, but, there are absolutely no rules whatsoever of that nature, of a racial nature at all. In fact, living here in this country, I've been here 40 years, and all the other devotees basically are born here. So there's a great sensitivity to just be careful not to disturb people along racial lines. So definitely on the official administrative level of ISKCON in South Africa, there never, ever has been any official policy of discrimination, absolutely at all. Having said that, there's no doubt some mistakes have been made. Particularly, as far as I'm aware, particularly in the sort of just social interactions, personal interactions amongst the devotees in general. Unfortunately, only some time after the events, but I have received a few reports of devotees saying offensive things to African devotees on the basis of race. Unfortunately, sort of too late, it's certainly too late to intervene and do something in the actual situation itself. But we have become, I would say, painfully aware that there's a need for ourselves, that the leadership, the administration in South Africa, to really be more alert and active in seeing these things don't happen, and if they somehow do happen, to really take appropriate action. So, if you don't mind me going on for a couple of minutes about this.
No, this is very interesting. Please do, and maybe even add some of the spiritual perspective of how this stuff happens.
Right. Yeah. So we right now we're in the process in the last couple of, let's say last week, of forming a committee, a multiracial committee for dealing with interracial problems. The committee basically has been formed, or almost been formed, with devotees from different racial backgrounds, intelligent devotees, experienced devotees. And through doing this, our hope is that if the offended African devotees are willing or feel able to come forward and just stand up and say, this happened, that happened, then this group of devotees will take action, serious action. Because, we are so well aware that it's our philosophy. It's one of the main things. We are not these bodies. Krishna's first instruction in Bhagavad Gita. So, because of the political history and all that in this country, my gosh, it's been quite amazing. So generally we try to be very, very sensitive. So I feel that at least from the point of view of the leadership as such, if there have been any, you could say crimes, if we use that term, but they're crimes of omission and not really of commission. I'm absolutely sure none of our leadership has really done anything really like derogatory or negative in racial terms. I'm sure of, because they're very aware. They've lived in it all their lives. They know what it means. Yeah. And they know how it hurts. So we are really trying. I mean, we're trying to get it together, put it that way. I could mention one problem we've had. It's an interesting problem. Here I am, I've been the GBC here. Now we've got a co-GBC. But otherwise, I've been the GBC here for, I think it's 22, 23 years, something like that. And I think I try to be open to the devotees and, accessible. But quite honestly, not one devotee has personally come to me and reported that in racial terms that they were treated in this way or that. And so I would really appeal to the African devotees and all the devotees, really, that, if there's something that happens which is not appropriate, not right in Krishna consciousness, just human terms, my door is open, and I'm anxious to hear these things, and I'm ready to take action, appropriate action, and try and help.
Wow, this is a very powerful response, Maharaj. You're establishing a commission. You're open-hearted on the whole issue. I'm just surprised and elated, actually. It seems maybe this report from that lady devotee a couple of weeks ago, even though maybe she didn't speak accurately on a few things, did touch a nerve, and you just responded in a very proactive way. Congratulations.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it struck a nerve. It struck many nerves, frankly. And even though there was inaccuracy there, I'm sure well-intentioned, but I think the end result is going to be very positive.
Beautiful. Tell us a little more what's going on in South Africa from a yatra point of view. And, of course, there's many mature devotees in South Africa. You, of course, know that the GBC strategic planning team has some of its core members as also members of your yatra, such as Subhananda Prabhu. And
Right.
So tell us in general what's going on in South Africa.
Well, there's a lot going on, and actually there's been a lot going on for quite some time. The movement started in the mid-70s when some devotees came from America, and at that time they registered ISKCON because it was apartheid, the official racial time. We were registered as a white society, would you believe? An official white society. It's a fact, in 1975. But as the devotees were preaching in the late 70s, even though they were mainly or all white devotees and just a handful, but they found that the Indian community just suddenly took a liking to them like mad. And the movement just exploded in the Indian community. There was a program of what they call tent campaigns, a big marquee that can seat hundreds of people, and doing a program like for a week or so. So in this way, thousands of Indian-bodied people became devotees, and the movement developed and became very prominent in the country, and very prominent in the Indian community indeed. So then in 85, we opened our main temple where I am now in Durban, South Africa. Beautiful temple that we built. About 120,000 people came for the opening over a couple of days. And that also really put us on the map in a very big way. And because there was so much, you could say, demand from the Indian community, our involvement with the white community almost disappeared, actually, because, you can only do so much in 24 hours. And, because of the apartheid, the official racial policy, we were not doing much. We were doing a little, but really not much at all amongst the African community. So, since that time, well, we have Rath Yatra generally every year in Durban, and over the Easter weekend, 4 days, usually 120,000 people come. Again, it's mainly Indian. And they're really nice. Generally, they're just wonderful devotees, very sincere and active. So that's a very, very successful program. And Food for Life, just over this lockdown period, whatever, couple of months, whatever it's been, the devotees have distributed more than 1 million meals in different parts of South Africa. We're working in the African community. There are a number of African-bodied devotees and some really excellent, highly intelligent and highly qualified African-bodied devotees, very qualified people who are preaching in different ways. We have university programs going on, which it's all pretty multiracial, really. In South Africa, there's always some idea of what is the racial mix going on. But in the universities in Johannesburg, in Durban, in Cape Town particularly, the three main cities, there's many university programs going on. In the main university in the country in Johannesburg, we have our own rooms in the university, and the devotees are doing programs every morning and every day, 5 days a week in the main university.
So I understand that the BBT, African BBT, is also headquartered in South Africa. Govardhan Prabhu, who is your co-GBC, is the head of that. Is book distribution an important part of South Africa?
It's an important part. We've got very good leadership in the book distribution. There's not as many books going out as we would like, of course, but we've been for the last few years trying to give some very serious focus to book distribution. And the BBT, well, they're translating books. They're printing some English books, but they're printing books and preparing books for printing in the local African languages. Zulu, I mean, Sutu, some of these languages you wouldn't be familiar with, Tswana, and languages from other parts of the African continent.
I do have some awareness of some of these languages. I happen to love Africa and have traveled there on 3 or 4 occasions.
Okay, good. Yeah, well, you know, like I said earlier, I'm on an intermediate level with Russian. I give classes in Russian. Here, you know, I'm kind of a languages person. So when I kind of settled into the preaching here more after we opened the temple, I thought of learning Zulu. And I speak a tiny bit of Zulu, but I noticed that the African people we're preaching to, they all speak English. They all speak English. Mm-hmm. And they speak better English than I would be able to speak Zulu, or the other main language generally is Sutu or Southern Sutu. And I thought, you know, they speak English pretty good. And for me to learn 2 African languages, I can't manage along with English. Mm-hmm. But there's a real determination to try and spread Krishna consciousness amongst all the different groups.
Mm-hmm. So let's shift a little to the maybe a direct GBC service that you do on an international level. You know, certainly to begin with, you're currently serving as the first vice chair of the GBCEC. You are the chair of the GBC Nominations Committee. You're a very active member of the GBC Organizational Development Committee. All of these things are, of course, international service, worldwide service. So tell us some of what you do as the GBC first vice chair of the EC.
Okay, right, yes. You know, this is now the 3rd time I've been a member of the executive committee. 3rd time. Each time it's like 3 years. So sure, it's really developed a lot. It's the executive committee now compared to how it was 10 or more than 10 years ago when I was first on. It's really developed. We're communicating on a daily basis, like analyzing different sort of main controversies and matters of concern internationally. We have conference calls. We had one yesterday. Generally, every few days we have conference calls, the executive committee, and just updating ourselves with the latest happenings, the latest developments in fields like, for example, Vaishnavi Diksha Gurus are very, important, but I must say, very sensitive subject in different ways amongst different devotees. Yeah. And different other international matters, like right now, we're trying to figure out how are we going to have our 2 meetings of the whole GBC body. We have 2 every year. And each time it's either like 1 week or it's a couple of weeks. How are we going to have our meetings? And of course, it's possible to use Zoom and similar things, and that's what we're going to do. But here we've got devotees in every time zone on the planet. So for someone, it may be the middle of the day, that's fine. We can have a Zoom meeting. For someone else, it's midnight. So how to deal with these things, but we're working on it.
I'm really happy to hear this. As you know, I've attended GBC meetings nonstop since 2006. And I've been waiting and hoping that you make the decision to have a virtual meeting. And I think that's a very wise thing. I have a little hobby of astrophotography, and that keeps me up some nights during the new moon period. I can tell you it is not that difficult to shift my schedule in terms of my sleep time. It really only takes a day or two for me to get into a swing for 4 or 5 days. So I would be not so concerned about asking certain members, depending on which jurisdiction they're in, to just shift. Tell us about the nominations committee. You are the chairman of that.
Right.
Tell us all about that.
Yeah, well, I'm the chairman, it's a fact, but I'm mainly, because I'm an actual GBC member, I'm able to assist the devotees who are perhaps a little more, or quite a bit more active in really working on the system for nominating new members of the GBC body. So I'm a bit more behind the scenes, but yeah, the idea is that the majority of GBC members, we have currently 34. The majority of them are around my age or older. I'm almost 70. And, it's not so easy. And the GBC body has realized, and devotees who are working with and really assisting the GBC body, like your good self, have become vividly aware we have to bring in new people, younger people. It's just, unless it's going to be until death do us part, we got to bring the people in and get them used to being GBCs, because being a GBC in many ways is different from what a lot of people think it is. It's a lot more difficult. So therefore, the GBC Nominations Committee, we have our eyes open. We have, people, we're in touch with people in different parts of the world, different yatras of ISKCON, to try and locate devotees who have potential for such service. So in that regard, it's because it's not an easy thing. It's not an easy thing to be a GBC. It's hard to just throw someone in and say, go for it. So, there's a very intelligent program being put together kind of for staging the whole process, whereby devotees who may have potential for that sort of service, if not for becoming a GBC as such, but at least for international service, not some locally focused type of program, which has, been our way of doing things for so long, but a broader base of awareness and perception in their lives, trying to involve such devotees in assisting the GBC body in different ways. So there are what we call the GDOs, the Global Duty Officers, who on behalf of the GBC body become engaged in some international type of service, like book distribution internationally, like legal affairs internationally, and different things like this. So we're trying to locate, and you could say perhaps extricate sometimes from local involvement, really qualified, fairly senior devotees, mature devotees, who either have or could develop an international perspective on things, and bring them in assisting the GBC body. And in some cases, they can then come forward from being global duty officers to actually being GBC members. And one such person who has just become a GBC member is Govardhan Prabhu, who's born and raised in South Africa, highly competent person materially and spiritually. And he went through the GDO process, working on international financial matters. And now he's become co-GBC here in South Africa. So it's a wonderful initiative, because before, I've been a member of the GBC body for more than 20 years, but I used to attend the meetings. Maybe like altogether, I've been there every year for more than 30 years. And I saw how people came in and went out of being GBCs, and talk about being thrown in the deep end. And then if you can't make it, you just get sort of tossed out the window or something like that. It's not the way to do things. So, we really appreciate the efforts of devotees like your good self and others who are assisting you. And I'm trying to help in my own way of bringing in people with the potential and letting them get some training and experience. And then before our GBC members have to be replaced on the basis of their passing away, have a program for just bringing in and handing over the responsibilities. This is the right way to do things.
Thank you for that, Maharaj. That was really illuminating. It seems that maybe ISKCON is moving into what you might call a little bit more of a rational phase, where it's not just the pure sentiment that is causing a person to becoming a leader, but then also the needs of the organization on a worldwide basis are being analyzed, and people have to serve those needs too. When we look out into the future, what are some of the challenges that you see ISKCON is facing that our new GBCs are going to have to be dealing with?
Yes, well, there are definitely there's definitely enough challenges, as ISKCON develops and increases, as it's just doing more and more. So the challenges increase, actually. One of the great challenges that we're facing now is the sort of, you could use the term clash, or at least, the difficulties in finding common ground between what might, at least in sort of classical political terms, would be called a very conservative element within ISKCON and a very liberal element within ISKCON. These things exist. There are devotees who are just very, in their minds, they're very much following Srila Prabhupada as he is, Krishna consciousness as it is. Which, in principle, of course, is absolutely wonderful. But there's a problem, there's a challenge in them becoming able to understand sufficiently considerations of time, place, and circumstance, particularly in the Western world. And then at the other end of the scale, you've got devotees very intelligent and sincere and enthusiastic and successful in presenting Krishna consciousness in, you could say, indirect ways, using different aspects of the current Western cultures, like even New Age style of interests, to at least introduce Krishna consciousness to people in non-confrontational ways, and then gradually bring them into actual practical Krishna consciousness. And some of these devotees are extremely successful in getting people to become devotees, actually. So that's a challenge. That's a real challenge. Then, of course, things like the Vaishnavi Diksha Guru subject. Again, you've got the very conservative wing who are quite convinced that it's not just that they're opposed, but they think it's not according to Srila Prabhupada and the tradition, and others. And then there are others at the other end who see how some lady preachers are already being extremely successful and giving people the inspiration that a guru is meant to give. So to bring those together, well, they're works in progress. They really are.
Sometimes it seems that these are things that we're going to just learn to live with. The dynamics and the polarities are things to be managed, as opposed to getting everybody on the same page. Maybe there's multiple pages that it's okay that we're on, as opposed to everyone on the same page. Maybe you could speak a bit about, notwithstanding that difference of opinion and the diversity of opinion, we still seem to have a great need to increase the amount of unity that we have. Is increasing the unity of the devotional community also one of the challenges?
Yeah, well, it's a challenge. It's sort of, you could say, one of the nicer challenges, more enlivening challenges. So the GBC body, with your good self and others, they have put together the ILS, ISKCON Leadership Sangha, then things that like the Sangha of Gurus, GBCs, and Sannyasis. These are really wonderful programs of sharing and associating and encouraging appreciation of the successes and abilities of other devotees. So, and in some countries or some areas of the world, they have started having their own local, regional ILS, ISKCON Leadership Sangha. I've taken part in some myself. So this is a very nice thing. Then there's also a really nice thing, which it started in Russia. Well, it started, I guess, with the Mayapur festival, but then it really took off in Russia, is big devotee festivals, where there's thousands of devotees, actual practicing devotees. And there's all sorts of seminars and discussion programs, kirtans, and so on like that, bringing together the devotees from the different sort of, you could say, extremes, if you want to put it that way, or, devotees with different interests in Krishna consciousness. So that spread from Russia, it spread to America and other parts of the world. So this is, unity and diversity. This is how Prabhupada put it. And we don't want the diversity to become such that the unity just becomes fractured too much.
So, Maharaj, in a somewhat, in fact, in a very serious space, we have all entered into a daily, even hourly, prayerful mood for the well-being and the return to health of Bhakti Charu Maharaj, who has now been hit very strongly with this COVID. I did have some awareness, some direct awareness that Govardhan Prabhu, as your co-GBC, got on top of that COVID issue quite quickly, rapidly actually. Tell us how COVID has affected your life and the lives of the South African, and are you all practicing safe practices? How are you doing with the temples opening and stuff of that nature? Tell us about COVID and how it's affecting you.
Okay. Yeah, good point. Yeah, Govardhan has helped a lot. We have a very strong leadership team. Swarup Damodar Prabhu, very on top of things, amazing. So, at the moment, our temples are closed to the public. Our temples are closed. And so far, amongst the devotee community, we've had, to my knowledge, we've not had any deaths, any fatalities in South Africa. Yes, because we are being extremely careful. We really are being careful about this. So, unfortunately, of course, in doing that, our preaching has become extremely restricted. But at the same time, I personally and a few other of the local preachers, I think, if you don't mind me saying, particularly myself, I'm doing internet preaching, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, and so on. I'm doing a Nectar of Devotion seminar 5 nights a week at the moment. And we have, internationally, we have about 500 or 600 devotees participating every evening. It's an official Bhakti Shastri program. And so I'm preaching. Normally, I would go to a Namahata or house program every night, every single night without fail, and preach to, 20 to 100 people, 20 to 50 perhaps more often. And then the Sunday programs in the temples, couple of Sunday programs. But now I'm preaching to 500-600 people.
Wow.
And morning japa from 5:15 after Mangalarti to 7, the greeting of the deities. Then there's, I'm not sure of the number, but it's probably about 400 devotees chanting with me. So, you could say it's been a blessing in disguise, heavily disguised. But there's been a positive side to it, and we're trying to maximize it as much as possible.
Very great report, and the shift, it sounds, to doing things virtual has been quite successful. We're getting close to the end of our time. I look at the great gifts that Srila Prabhupada gave us, Sri Nam, the Bhagavatams, and the Chaitanya Charitamrita and Bhagavad Gitas. One of the gifts that he gave us, up there among the greatest gifts, actually is ISKCON, the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. Maybe we could end with just a few words from you about the importance of creating some level of sacrifice in each and every one of our personal lives, some level of sacrifice to make ISKCON better. I think that might be a good way to close our time together.
Okay, yeah. Well, when Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj came here, for the opening of the temple in 1985. It may have been his first visit. He really appreciated the very involved mood. Like he said, this is like an international society of the spiritual world. So this, we have to come onto the spiritual platform. Obviously, that's what Krishna consciousness is. But we have to really keep that impetus there to come onto and remain on the spiritual platform of being devotees and understanding that, like, for example, amongst the congregation here in South Africa, where the vast majority of devotees are congregation, as Prabhupada said in Bhagavad Gita, if the devotee has to work, the devotee works to live and does not live to work. So therefore the devotee sees himself, herself as a devotee first, and then whatever the occupational identity is, that really comes second. And understand that our goal in life is not just to become affluent and all that sort of thing. Of course, one has to be able to live as much as possible a decent way of life. We don't at all encourage extremes like living under trees, etc. But the priority has to be there, that we have come to Krishna consciousness already. We're here in Krishna consciousness. Let's not hold ourselves back by just getting caught up with material necessities or, desirable material things. Keep that in the forefront. And then when that's in the forefront, then to go the extra mile, to make some little extra effort to help Prabhupada, to push forward Prabhupada's movement, and to push Prabhupada forward into the forefront of human society, that becomes much more real and practical and something desirable for the devotees. So, but that requires that the leadership has to be spiritually strong. It really has to be spiritually strong in terms of their own sadhana, their own chanting, reading, preaching, and in terms of their giving to the other devotees who may be, by force of circumstances, having to work, etc. So that's what I feel. If the leadership is spiritually strong, then it can convey that strength to the other devotees, and then they'll be inspired. They can do so many things, like householders, congregational householders, being temple presidents, like Govardhan, being a GBC, taking major responsibilities for Prabhupada. Yeah. But the basic platform foundation of spiritual strength needs to be there in the leadership.
Well, thank you for these comments, Maharaj, and all the comments that you've made. It's really been wonderful listening to you and hearing of both your successes and the challenges that you're facing. It is time to end, and want to really extend our appreciation for your time and everything that you said. It's just been totally interesting to hear your viewpoints. So thank you so much. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Hare Krishna.
Thank you very much, Gopal Bhatta Prabhu. It's greatly appreciated. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.